Good afternoon, everyone. So many of you may be thinking, what's the big deal about a 50-year long career? We've all been trained for a 35 or a 40-year long career. The reality is that we need to get ready for probably a 60 or a 70-year long career. But if I said that, none of you would walk into this room. So now let's lock the doors and let's see how we get ready for a 60 or 70-year long career. Longevity is a fact, just some data, ugly chart. Point being, our average expectancy, our average life expectancy has been growing over the past 150 years, roughly at the tune of 3 years per decade. Earlier in the century, it was actually driven by lower mortality rate. Now it is actually driven by declining late life mortality. This is presumably here to stay. All of this is very good general statistics, but let me actually bring it home and bring it to individual statistics. What does this mean for you personally? What does this mean for the people in your organization? Well, looking at the room, I don't know what the average age is, but let me just take a guess. I figure, if some of you are born somewhere around 67, you have more than 50% chances of actually living till 95. And since I see, some younger people here, if you're born in 77, demographers posit that you have over 50% chances of living till you're 98. When I take this model and apply it to my kids, it actually turns out that they're likely to live till 105, 108. So let's actually think about what does that mean for all of us. So it's, another 50 years? 60 ahead of us? So how are you all going to use that time? Do you have an answer? Anyway, a long enough chunk of time to be strategic about how we're going to use it. So you may all have heard about stage life and how we are actually evolving from the traditional 3 stages to what looks more like 4 or 5 stages. And I want to, put some focus on the 2 new ones. Many of you may see in your classrooms or even in your employees the concept of, I'm actually done with my degree, or even in your kids, by the way. I'm done with, traditional study, and what are you going to do next? And yes, we can use the Vodafone app to figure out what are the jobs out there. But in the meantime, many of them have a very real interest to experiment because, hey, I have 70 years to work, so why rush? So that new phase is actually designed to provide better information and a chance to explore for the younger talent. And catering to that need might actually make a difference to many of your corporations. Let me touch for a second on the new phase that actually is carving out between career development and retirement. We call it the impact phase. Many of you may have in your organizations and maybe in your classrooms individuals who are somewhere between 45 and 55. They've actually, been tremendously successful. They actually are making great money, have great titles, and are looking for what next. And the what next is not necessarily the more money or the greater title. It's other things. And so that 4th phase, what we call the impact phase, is actually about finding meaning and having impact. And many of those individuals who, by the way, are done with family formation, have actually their savings, have some freedom to choose, are figuring out how to make the most of this phase. Again, acknowledging that there are phases gives us 2 things. One is the opportunity to feel that you're not the only one. Okay, so I am actually approaching the impact phase, and I'm about to design that phase. And so the second thing is actually really plan and be strategic about it. I find that most corporations are actually unaware of this phase and are not necessarily supporting some of their senior employees in making the most of this phase. So part of my little chat today is about how do we think about making the most of the 5-stage career. First of all, career models are evolving. We all know that. Part of it is the pace of change. Part of it is the change of our organizations. We've heard at length the importance of agile, the importance. And so for the average knowledge worker, and I think this applies for most of the organizations represented here, we're evolving from a Model T career to a Model M, where there is, because that career is longer, there is an opportunity to actually have different legs of deep expertise on which we rely on to be successful in that longer career. That evolution to the Model M career is actually not that clean, and we're in the midst of figuring out how to manage this. It can be messy. And this is what it may look like. So one works for an organization, then one is self-employed, then there's a transition phase, then he works for another organization, then he may be moving to a portfolio career. It's messy. A lady earlier today while I was having lunch was like, oh, you're the lifelong learning lady. I'm like, I love that name. So let me actually use, again, an opportunity to talk about the importance of lifelong learning. If this is the career model, if transitions are the new normal, lifelong learning is a key skill to develop. And surely corporations can do a lot to help individuals be comfortable with that idea. But it really is about empowering everyone with the recognition that things are changing. The company will do a lot of things for to support their growth, mostly within the corporation. There are many other things that those individuals need to be investing in. So we like to think about lifelong learning to lifelong earning. So career models are changing. By the way, the implications for this at an individual level is if you acknowledge this, when you manage your next step, you need to be thinking more broadly about how to make the most of that next step. Have you considered building a second leg of expertise? Are you actually making full use of those transitions? So at an individual level, just being cognizant of what this picture implies may actually drive to different decisions. At a company level, let me share some data from Deloitte and Burson. The career models are actually also changing, and all of you are adapting to how, to respond to the two things that we were talking about earlier, right? The sort of increasing changes in your businesses and a new workforce that demands different things. So from the fact that many of them are actually moving to developing careers that actually move horizontally, not only vertically, to the fact that some of them are actually thinking about designing career models that are 3 to 5 year long. All of you are trying to figure out how to best adapt to this reality. Sort of this is the data fact of, to actually prove that career models are evolving. I actually like, for those of you who like pictures more, I like this one as well. This is from one of our professors in organizational behavior. The thought of traditionally, we used to think about a career with one single leg and many ramifications, but one area of deep expertise, possibly 1 or 2 companies, and we are evolving to sort of catching the next wave, going to the top of it, and sometimes falling. Very different skills, very different way of designing this. And by the way, again, this is the picture part of it, but for many of us, we'll actually stay no more than 4 years in a given role. for many of us, certainly for the younger ones, they might have 12 to 15 jobs till they retire. So learning how to surf, kind of relevant. So how do we do that? Are you familiar with those acronyms? IQ, you all know, I'm sure. So, way back then, talent selection, talent promotion was based on IQ and how smart they are and how well can they move forward. A decade ago or so, we introduced EQ. And it so happens that, softer skills, emotional skills, empathy, ability to collaborate, ability to work in teams matter. We would pose it at IE that AQ is actually one of the leading indicators of your ability to surf in that 60, 70-year-long career. What is AQ? A guess? Adaptive quotient, and because we're all about agile these days, you can call it agile quotient. It really is about your ability to adapt. It consists of three things. One is the learning mindset. Two, it is about your cognitive skills. Three, it is about the emotional traits that allow you to be successful at the first two. The ability to deal with failure, the ability to persist, a whole new set of emotional behavior that we need to all start to build and develop. So AQ matters. By the way, I would encourage, the sort of the metacognition aspect of it. I would encourage you all, both in your organizations and in the classrooms, and to think about how to actually work with, sort of giving better learning to your employees or your students. But I happen to think that other tools are also equally effective to increase things like memory or processing speed, which again, are very relevant in this AQ. So here's a little tip. One of my favorite apps, Michael Merzenich, one of the fathers of neuroplasticity, who created a company called Posit Science, has been, developing this tool. The UX, not great, but it actually works. So do try it on, because if ability to learn and learning agility matters to adapting to that career, the more opportunities to train it and develop your muscle, the one standing, in your skull, the more successful you're likely to be. So AQ on the one hand. The other dimension to tap, and be successful in this longer career is about acknowledging the following fact, which is as important as the knowledge and skills that one has, the motivation and the values that actually drive you matter to create the change and the impact that one is expected to have, especially if you are in the business world. So really tapping into what are the motives of the individual, what is their purpose, is very important. Why? Because purpose and clarity of why they do things is going to allow those individuals to take risks, to take the wave up, to be okay when they fall, to take the next one up. So really identifying and working on what are the people's motivations and how their current role deliver on that is very, very important. So mindset matters, and as this slide says, all of our programs, and we are experts in this, focus on this, and we tend to put very little effort on this. So once I make that statement, let me actually just talk a little bit about the top part of the iceberg. Knowledge and skills, what are the ones that matter? Well, we've been talking about the digital transformation and what does that mean for learning and training, what's the taxonomy there. At IE, we've taken a simple, maybe a simplistic, but a simple approach, which is we believe that we need to actually create bilingual talent. We need to create centaurs. Some of the conversations I attended talked about actually humans interacting with machines, and that being able to, that delivers a greater value. So this is our way to picture it. One needs to have certainly the expertise in whichever domain they've chose to be expert, but the interaction with machines is important. As one of our professors says, we refer to tech until it works because it then has a name. So I don't know whether it's going to be, making them experts in IoT, in AI, or frankly, irrelevant. But one of the things we strongly believe, at least in the 5 to 10 years, and for the people who are now dealt with some of the challenges that I'm talking about, one of the things we believe is important in this centaur model is being capable of extracting insights from data. Because no matter the technology, actually being able to read and develop the insights needed for the decision matter a lot. And so let me show some data here very quickly. Burning Glass, company that actually is in the business of mapping job demands with skills offered and really seeing where there's an arbitrage opportunity. This talks about, again, that concept of hybrid channel and hybrid genome. Certainly, demand for accountants and CPAs growing and at double digit. That's awesome. Data scientists growing at 3 digits. But let's actually unpack this. And I'm not going to bore you with the details of this data. But essentially what you see is that the analyst demands, whether it is in finance, in marketing, in sales, in operations, actually have a much stronger existing base. And those are the people that need to be data fluent and in an agile world, able to actually process the data to make decisions faster in the front line, whatever it is that front line is about. So as we think about the 70-year-long career, and depending on which leg you're in, it is important to continue building the knowledge and skills that are going to make you successful for that. Again, depending on which leg are you in, being bilingual, at least in data, feels like a very powerful skill to have. Just finishing. If you believe some of the assertions that I have shared with you today about the gift of a longer career, these are some of the things that we all need to work on, both on an individual level as well as at a corporate level. Real career management skills, so the ability to A, project oneself into the future, what is it that I want to do in the next 3 to 5 years, and doing this continuously. B, really challenging oneself as to, how am I going to add value in my job this year? How could I add value in my organization? Or am I better off? And could I add more value somewhere else? Is a key component of this. Being bilingual, so being thoughtful about what is that centaur that we want to develop and grow up to be. Again, our hypothesis, depending on which point of your career you are, data is a key component of that. Build your brand. I'm sure you're all aware of this, but if you're not visible, hard to take the next wave. And finally, build your network. The recognition that the network that gets you to one role may not necessarily be the network that's relevant for your next role, so be strategic about it. Matters a lot. So those are some of the very tactical skills that we should provide our employees and our students with to make sure they're successful in that longer career. But I don't want to finish this conversation and this mini lecture without talking about 2 things. As we think about longevity, most people, and again, longevity has an implication of a longer career. We've talked about that. The next question people ask is about how do I finance it? And again, employers in the room have a big role to play to raise awareness about this situation and the importance to start providing for the future, not necessarily relying on the Ponzi schemes that some of those pension plans have begun to be. But so the financial component is an important one. And I do want to end with the other component, which is to make the most of that longer life, and something that is hardly spoken about. Relationships matter, and this is the study that Harvard conducted over 75 years of study, and it's led by the School of Medicine. And by monitoring over 600 people over 75 years and looking at their medical variables, at their professional variables, at their socio-demographic variables, the one thing that best predicted not only a longer life, but a fulfilling longer life was those relationships. And so as one manages the career, as one provides for the finances for a longer career, let's not do that alone. After all, it's less about work and it is about a fulfilling life. So let me end with this picture. Thank you very much for your time.